Welcome back to The Lurking Fear. I'm glad you found your way here. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. If you've been with us for a while, leave a comment below. I want to know what you think of tonight's account. They say that life sometimes forces us to witness things we never wish to see. My name is Dr. Silas. I am a doctor by profession. You might wonder how a doctor, a man grounded in logic, could have a ghost story to tell. But I have learned that hands do not just tremble from the cold. Sometimes they freeze from a terror that science cannot explain. Years ago, I ran a small two-story hospital. It was a modest building. The ground floor housed the doctor's cabin, the nurse's station, and the patient wards. The upper floor contained a storeroom, 4 patient rooms, and my personal room for resting. Because the hospital was located on a road just outside the village limits, the top floor was rarely used, often sitting in a heavy, unsettling silence. One evening, I arrived for my shift late. Usually, I reached the hospital by 6 p.m., but that day I was an hour behind. Typically, we saw 8 to 10 patients a night, but on this particular evening, the waiting room was empty. Not a single patient's slip was on the counter. I asked my nurse, Elena, why are there no patients today? She looked at me with uneasy eyes and said, Doctor, today is the full moon. She explained that some patients had come earlier, but because I was late, they left before it got dark. Then I remembered something. For the past 2 or 3 months, the villagers had stopped leaving their homes on full moon nights. Rumours were spreading that a tantric woman, a witch, was roaming the roads on full moon and new moon nights. They said she would mesmerize travellers, enslaving them before offering them as sacrifices. In the last few months, 4 or 5 people from the surrounding villages had vanished without a trace. That was the reason the hospital was empty. I went upstairs to my room and sat down to watch TV. After a while, I got bored and went back downstairs. Just then, the night porter called. He usually worked as the male nurse at night. He told me he wouldn't be coming in. I understood immediately he was too afraid of the witch. When I told Elena this, she also refused to go home. She said she would sleep in the nurse's room at the hospital tonight. I thought to myself how strange people are, getting scared of anything. I said to her, Eleanor, do you really believe in these things? Tantra, mantras, sacrifices, it's all lies. Elena looked at me seriously. Doctor, there is talk of this witch in every village nearby, so there must be some truth to it. And even if magic is fake, if I leave now and she catches me on the road and kills me, I won't have time to explain to her that magic isn't real. Why should I risk my life for bravery? People say she is insane. So Elena decided to stay. I went back up to my room. Elena locked the hospital gate and went to the nurse's room to sleep. It was midnight. I was lying in bed watching TV, drifting into a light sleep. Suddenly, the sound of violent rattling woke me up. Someone was shaking the hospital gate. Then, the bell rang. For 2 or 3 minutes, I heard voices downstairs. I couldn't understand what was happening. Elena wasn't calling me or ringing the bell. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I went down. At the gate, 2 men were supporting a half-burnt woman. Elena was arguing with them, telling them to take her to the government hospital immediately as we couldn't treat her here. I walked forward. One of the men folded his hands and begged, Sir, she is burned very badly. Please save her. I stepped closer to the woman. I looked at her and said, She is already dead. Hearing this, the men placed the blanket-wrapped body on the floor. The smell was overpowering, the stench of burnt meat. Her face and neck were melted. I put on my gloves and checked her pulse and neck again. Her veins had stopped. Her breathing had ceased. I shook my head. No chance. She is dead. Who is she? The men looked at each other, terrified. Maybe they didn't know what to answer. Then one man said to the other, You stay here. I will go to the police station and bring a large vehicle to take the body for the post-mortem. He left quickly. I asked the remaining man, Brother, who is this woman? He looked around nervously and whispered, Sir, this is a widow from our village. You know the witch people talk about. Tonight, she was trying to sacrifice a poor woman. The villagers found out and went into the jungle to find her. We found her tying the victim to a tree, performing black magic. The police were too late, and their car couldn't enter the jungle track, so we villagers took bikes in. By the time we reached her, she was half burnt, crawling away. He paused, shuddering. Sir, even while she was burning, she was laughing. When we put her on the bike to bring her here, she was alive. She was muttering things. When I told her to be quiet, she would laugh maniacally. Even in that pain, she seemed to be enjoying dying. I looked at the corpse. It was burnt severely. I told the man, until the vehicle comes, pick up the body and put it in the patient room. Cover it. As I looked at her face, a chill ran through me. Her eyelids were open, and her pupils looked distinct, as if she were alive and staring right at me. I quickly closed her eyelids with my hand, turned away, and went back upstairs. I told Elena to keep an eye on the man. I went to my room, turned off the TV, and tried to sleep. I was in a light slumber when I heard a whisper right next to my ear. I opened my eyes. No one was there. I pulled the sheet up and went back to sleep, and I fell into a deep sleep. But then I felt a presence. I could feel a shadow moving around me internally. I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or if it was real. The shadow was swaying around me, chanting mantras. I watched the shadow moving left and right. The terrifying part was that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see its face. Every time I tried to focus, it blurred. My breathing became rapid. My heart pounded. I asked in a cold, suppressed voice, "Who are you?" It didn't answer. It just kept circling. It moved slowly into a dark corner of the room. I couldn't see it, but I could hear its voice, still chanting those mantras. I whispered again, "Who are you?" "I can't see you." From the darkness, a voice replied, "But I can see you." Hearing that voice, goosebumps erupted all over my body. The shadow slid out of the darkness and stood right in front of me. It was the burnt woman. Her face was a charred skull. I jolted up in bed, sitting up instantly. I looked around in panic. The room was empty. I wiped the sweat from my face. It was just a dream, a terrible nightmare. I felt awful. I had never had such a dream before. It must have been the stress of seeing that body. To distract myself, I turned the TV back on. I don't know when I dozed off watching TV, but it happened again. I heard the chanting of mantras. I sat up. The TV was still on. This is too much, I thought. Why am I hearing this? Why am I so scared of a corpse? I'm a doctor. I've seen death before. Then I heard a sound from outside the room. It was the sound of something being dragged. I stood up. Something strange was happening. I decided to go downstairs to see if the police had arrived and taken the body. I went down. The lobby was empty. The second man was gone. The hospital gate was wide open. And Elena? She was sleeping with her head on the desk. I peeked into the patient room. The corpse was still lying there. It had been an hour and a half. No police, no vehicle. I was furious. I shook Elena awake. "Elena, what are you doing?" "I told you to keep watch." "Where did the man go?" She woke up screaming. Sir! I don't know." I was awake, and then suddenly it felt like someone had taken control of me. Against my will, I fell into a deep sleep. She looked terrified. I felt the same thing she was describing. I realized we were in trouble. The phone lines were dead. I told her, "Come with me. We have to move this body outside the hospital. Once it's out, we will lock the main gate and the doors. I don't feel safe with it inside." I asked Elena to get some old bed sheets from the storeroom. She brought 3 or 4. I started wrapping the corpse in another sheet. The smell of burnt flesh was unbearable now. As I was wrapping it, the blanket suddenly slipped off her face. We both jumped back in shock. Her face was withered, but her eyes were wide open and bulging out of their sockets, protruding abnormally. My heart raced. Elena whispered, "Sir, You closed her eyes. I saw you. How are they open again? I was scared myself, but I said, don't pay attention to it. It's a corpse. Changes happen in the body after death. And I covered her face again and wrapped her tight. We both used all our strength to lift the body. It had become incredibly heavy. It was stiff with rigor mortis. We struggled, dragging it inch by inch out of the hospital. Outside, a fierce wind was blowing. The cloth over the corpse kept flapping up. Elena, go close the gate, I said. I'll watch the body. As she moved away, I looked down. The wind blew the cloth off the face again. A sensation of pure electricity ran through me. I stepped back, shivering. I saw a shine in the corpse's eyes, a white, milky luminescence. I quickly looked away. Elena came back. She shook me. Sir, what happened? You look so scared. I looked up at the dark sky, taking a deep breath to steady my trembling hands. Nothing, I lied. But the truth was, in that split second, I had seen something in that dead woman's eyes. It wasn't just a reflection, it was a shadow of recognition. For a terrifying moment, it felt like she had come alive. It felt like there had been deliberate movement in those cold, dead pupils, as if she were watching me. Okay, I said, forcing myself to look away from the bundle. You closed the gate. Let's go inside, now. We rushed in. I bolted the door from the inside. I told Elena, until the police come, or we see someone we know, we do not open this door. Elena was terrified. I told her, go sleep in my room upstairs. I will stay down here in the nurse's room and keep watch. There were still 5 hours until dawn. I lay on the bed in the nurse's room. I couldn't sleep. Outside, everything was quiet except for the wind. The swish of the gale made the silence even more horrifying. It was the scariest night of my life. To pass the time, I picked up a newspaper. While reading, my eyes began to droop. Suddenly, I was startled by a thumping noise. It was coming from upstairs. I pressed the bell that rang in my room upstairs to wake Elena. No answer. I rang it 10, 12 times. Still, the thumping continued, a dragging, heavy sound. I went to the stairwell and called out to her from the bottom. No reply. Terrified, I slowly opened the door and peeked out, just checking if the sound was coming from above. It definitely was. I walked out of the nurse's room and climbed the stairs with light, fearful steps. I wanted to look out the window to see if the corpse was still there, but I didn't have the courage. I reached the top. Elena was walking on the balcony. She wasn't walking normally. She was banging her head against the door frame while muttering something. I grabbed her shoulders and pulled her into my room. I made her lie down on the bed and covered her with a sheet. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my hand. I froze. She spoke. I can see you. I snatched my hand away and stepped back. Elena sat up in bed, looking panicked. What happened, sir? Did something go wrong? You don't know what just happened, I asked. No, really, I don't know. But something bad is here. Suddenly, her eyes went wide. Fear washed over her face. She looked behind me and screamed, she's there. Look. What does she want? Tell her to go away. I spun around. There was no one. Who? I asked. The dead woman, the burnt woman. I was terrified, but I tried to calm her. Elena, it's just fear. We are hallucinating. Just rest. I told her to rest, and I went back downstairs. My mind was telling me to check outside, but I didn't have the courage. Praying to God, I went back into the nurse's room. I didn't know how to face this. I lay down again. After a while, I heard a rattling sound. This time, I decided I wouldn't go out until I heard a human voice. I stood by the door, pressing my ear against it. Moments later, I heard footsteps, then the sound of the door opening. It had to be Elena, but why would she open the door at this hour? Then I heard it, crying, a loud weeping sound like someone mourning a death. I was scared, but I couldn't stop myself now. Who is crying outside? Is it Elena? Why is she crying like that? I gathered my courage and slowly opened the door. I peeked into the lobby. The hospital door was wide open. Elena was sitting outside near the gate. The tube light was flickering. I knew it was her. I stepped out a little and called, "Elena, Elena, what are you doing there?" She didn't look at me. She just kept weeping. "Do you know that woman? Is that why you are crying? Look, I was scared. That's why I put her outside. Forgive me." I walked closer, but I couldn't get too close. The wind was blowing hard. Her crying was terrifying me now. I felt guilty, like maybe I made a mistake moving the body. I slowly walked up to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Elena, pull yourself together." Still weeping, she turned to look at me. She was crying, but there was a smile on her face. Her pupils were shining white, as if the moon had descended into her eyes. I stumbled back. She opened her mouth to speak, but no voice came out. My teeth began to chatter. I felt a deep cold inside me, yet sweat poured from my forehead. I backed away slowly. Suddenly, Elena went completely silent. I stopped, wondering what she would do next. Then she stood up. With slow, deliberate movements, Elena bent down. She picked up the half-burnt corpse. She lifted it onto her shoulder effortlessly. My mind broke. Just a while ago, the two of us couldn't lift that body. It was dead weight. And now, Elena was carrying it alone. She started walking. She walked out of the gate, carrying the corpse, heading straight for the bushes behind the hospital. I stood there, watching until she disappeared into the thick, dark undergrowth. I tried to call out, but my brain had gone numb. Seeing that impossible strength, a high fever gripped me instantly. I stumbled back inside, locked the door, and injected myself with a heavy sedative. I couldn't handle consciousness anymore. The face of the nurse and that corpse kept flashing before my eyes. When I woke up, police were standing over me. It was morning. One officer said, "We need to show you something." I was still in shock, barely able to speak. They took me behind the hospital, deep into the bushes. There, hanging from a tree by the bedsheet, was Elena's body. I felt sick. I told the police everything about the two strangers, the burnt woman and the night. The police told me that the burnt corpse was indeed the witch. The villagers had tried to burn her, and her accomplices had brought her here. The police searched the forest all night. They found Elena's body, but the burnt corpse of the witch was never found. I don't know if she was really dead, or if she was pretending to die, or if she died and came back to life, because after she died, there was no proof of her death. Rumours spread. People stopped coming to the hospital. A few months later, I closed it down. But to this day, I don't know what that thing was. I still hear that whisper. E can see you. And that wraps up tonight's story. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, join the community. Until next time, stay safe and always sleep with the lights on.